Welcome to Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire, a pro wrestling podcast brought to you by DMV Wrestling at dmvprowrestling.com. Be sure to visit the site every day for the latest pro wrestling news. Thank you for joining us. My guest today is Logan Easton Laroux. He's a native of Northern Virginia and has been a professional wrestler since 2007. He is a former VCW heavyweight champion and one half of NRG, the current VCW tag team champions. He's wrestled in several companies where he held other titles. Laroux announced recently that he's retiring this year. VCW announced that the farewell match of Logan Easton Laroux will be against AEW star Wheeler Yuta on November 11th in Alexandria, Virginia. Stay tuned to the DMV Wrestling website for more on that show. I'll start off with a handful of icebreaker questions before we move into the meat of the interview. Okay, what's your favorite food?
Favorite food is pizza.
And your favorite drink?
Favorite drink is probably the Silver Ice Rockstar. I drink one every morning.
That's the second person we've had who gave an energy drink answer. Dustin Tara told us C4.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Yeah, need our caffeine.
What is your favorite vacation spot?
Me and my wife love Key West, Florida.
And what is your favorite band or musician?
It's a pretty non-cultured pick, but it's probably Blink-182.
Okay, and what is the last book you read?
The last book I read, I believe, was Quinton Tarantino's novelization of his movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That was a great movie. I'll have to read the book.
Yeah, it adds a lot of details. It's really well done. I do recommend it.
And what is the hardest bump you've ever taken?
The hardest bump I've ever taken. I used to do tag team with my tag team partner NRG. We used to do a spot, kind of like a Hardy Boy spot, where I jump off his back and dive out of the ring. And I did that, and I totally missed the person I was supposed to land on. And I landed in like the first and second row, and that really sucked.
And what wrestling shows did you watch on TV or in person growing up that played a role in you choosing to become a wrestler?
When I was a kid, I was totally a WWF kid. I would say SmackDown was like my favorite show every week. Of course, I watched Raw as well, but like as I was coming into more of like a quote unquote smart fan, or like middle school age, was the brands were split, and I would say I was a bigger SmackDown than Raw fan, and so I watched that a little more religiously.
And what kind of training did you undergo to become a wrestler?
So I trained with Kaita Pro Wrestling that used to be based in Manassas, Virginia. I started when I was 16, and in my class were Nyla Rose and Mia Yim. Now, I think she has a different name in WWE, but those are two of the people I trained with, under John Kerman, Christian York, Bobby Shields, and C.A. Elliott.
And what specific wrestlers back then influenced you the most to become involved in pro wrestling?
So growing up, Jeff Hardy was definitely number one. Jeff Hardy, for sure. Shawn Michaels. I think every white guy under 6 foot is a Shawn Michaels fan. Sting, of course. Rey Mysterio. I was always a fan of like the more high-flying babyface type wrestlers, which is funny because I've never portrayed that very well myself while wrestling.
Who are some wrestlers that you've enjoyed working with the most?
Just off the top of my head, Sanjay Dutt is probably my favorite opponent. Eric Royal is definitely high up on that list as well. Recently, both Cheeseburger and Rhett Titus, I love getting in the ring with them. Bobby Shields always. And a tag team called Devastation Corporation that was based in Chikara. I'm a big fan of wrestling them. We always had good, brutal matches together.
What wrestling or media resources or influences did you draw upon as you constructed your persona of champion of the 1%?
I'm a real movie nerd. I watch everything, and I would say, like, as champion of the 1%, I feel like every rich guy gimmick nowadays kind of has a little bit of Patrick Bateman, American Psycho. As I was coming into my own, getting more bookings was around the time Wolf of Wall Street came out, so that definitely get into it. Gordon Gekko from Wall Street. Just, I mean, real life people too. I don't want to get political or anything, but there's definitely some real life politician and media or social figures that I kind of grab some influence, take things here and there from.
That makes a lot of sense, and I know it's kind of more of a harder edge to it from the names you described than the original Four Horsemen Ric Flair gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good thing about a wrestling gimmick is the ability for it to be malleable. Like, it can work in front of a fair show with lots of kids, or it can work in like a brewery, more bar setting that's mostly like drunk, more like heavy metal type fans, as opposed to just like somebody that wants to see the bad guy fall down a lot, make a jerk of himself.
And talk to me about what you see as the major differences between singles wrestling and tag team wrestling, and how your career has been impacted by both.
There's a an art to both of them. Personally, I do prefer a singles match just because like I can be a bit of a control freak, and a good part of the tag team match you can be on the outside, not in the ring, and lack control, and sometimes that can be frustrating. I do think they're almost like different genres of movies, like I would, or media in general. Like a tag team match maybe is more like a TV series, whereas putting together a singles match is more like putting together a movie. There's more moving parts in a tag team match, and I think for the most part, people might think that all wrestling tells a similar story. I do think tag team wrestling, good tag team wrestling, isn't as A to B to C as it often is on indie shows, because a lot of times it'll just be two guys kind of thrown together and they're not really like a functional tag team. Like when I watch in current wrestling, when I watch like FTR matches, I really feel like, man, they're so fucking creative. And I used to love like Brainbusters and Rockers matches. Mike Quackenbush was always talking about them, and I love them because like you would never know where it was like this is where the real cutoff happens. This is where the bad guys take over. It builds and builds and builds. Hot tag, blah blah blah. Like if you watch wrestling for much time, you definitely recognize that. But I think with FTR and with those Brainbusters guys, you used like it would be so blended. You wouldn't even like in your head you'd be invested, but you wouldn't recognize like okay, here's the cutoff. This is the heat spot. We're waiting for the hot tag. It was always just moving and exciting, and I love. Uh, I hope my best matches as a tag team uh, can have some of that to them.
I grew up as a big tag team fan back in the '80s when there was a lot more tag team wrestling in some of the national circles than there has been lately.
I think the '80s really is kind of the golden age of tag team wrestling. Even like it wasn't always traditional 2-on-2, but like the Freebirds and the Von Erichs, same things like Rockers, Brainbusters. You know, it's just like it was dudes going at it, and like they had each other's backs in the team, but they're just awesome action. And I think the more colors you can paint with, the more characters in the match. Sometimes the more exciting it is.
And speaking of the Von Erichs, are you looking forward to the Iron Claw movie?
Yeah, absolutely, man. That story, I think, as wrestling fans, we all know how it's going to go down. But you know, I know plenty of my non-real nerdy or not even wrestling fans at all watch that trailer and excited. And I'm like, oh man, you got to. I bet that movie is going to ruin a lot of people's days if they're not aware of the story, and even those of us who are aware of the story.
Do you have any favorite memories when you wrestled as Race Jackson?
Yeah, definitely. I'm still tagging with the reason now who, when I was Race Jackson, was Hype Rockwell. And like, I mean, we butt heads all the time. We're like brothers, but I love tagging with him. My number one favorite is probably when he and I won the Campeonatos de Parejas, the tag team championship in Chikara from Devastation Corporation. That was in Norfolk, actually. And it's still one of my probably like top five, if not higher than that, favorite matches ever. But me and him went to the UK twice and wrestled. We wrestled British Strong Style, Tyler Bate and Trent Seven over there. We tagged with Heidi Lovelace quite a few times. Uh, I didn't. I think some of the work I'm least proud of that people probably saw was after we split up and I was young and handsome Race Jackson. I think I never really found my footing as that character, even if some of the matches were okay. But as Race Jackson in the tag team NRG, I was really happy once we kind of figured out our chemistry together as a team and a lot of the matches we had.
I was looking for some of your promos earlier today when I was doing my research for this interview, and I found a Logan Easton Laroux and Champion of the 1% when you did for, I don't remember the exact promotion. I know it was Capital Television, and you were complaining about the building being too cold.
Basically, that came about just because I was complaining a lot in the dressing room because it was really fucking cold in that building, and then they just basically started filming me.
So it's pretty good ad lib then.
Yeah, that might have been the coldest I've ever been. I hate being cold, and that building was freezing. It was, I think it was in either Jersey City or Newark in like early March, and it was miserable.
There may be some younger fans or some older fans even who aren't familiar with Chikara, could you talk to me about Chikara and what you liked about it, and what some of the matches were like there, and what the format was like, and what the company was like when it was working in this area?
Sure. Chikara was a company that was kind of like the way Mike Quackenbush was the founder of Chikara always described it as like if WWE is vanilla and AEW or TNA or WCW is chocolate, Chikara is like the weird pink bubblegum flavor at the ice cream shop. It was kind of the wacky American lucha company. And a lot of the matches would be multi-man matches. Of course, there's still singles matches, but there would be way more like they did a King of Trios tournament every year. So 3-on-3 matches, there would be lots of scrambles kind of before that became the in thing on independent wrestling. I think there's a lot of things they did that were pretty cutting edge that we saw more in the independent wrestling boom of the last, like, I don't know, 10-ish years or so that I think Shakar was kind of the pioneer for. um, the company overall, I would just say, was like a very colorful company. I think if you were to bring kids to see wrestling, it was always family friendly. But it also like there would be deep storylines and kind of like if you were watching Arrested Development or something with like long running gags, Jakar would always have that and try to keep continuity. Which, for the most part, at least at the time when they started, or even again until 10 years ago, and now it's kind of missing again, there was no independent companies that were having these long running storylines. It was always just kind of here's a match, here's another match, here's a tag team match, and Shakar was very different than that. Uh, Also, currently, like if you flip on AEW or even WWE, there's so many wrestlers who either came from Chikara or passed through Chikara at some point, and the whole system down in at the Performance Center now, a lot of it is based in similar teaching under Drew Gulak to what Chikara was and what was taught at the Wrestle Factory.
And I know what you said about continuity and storyline. I've noticed that at different companies as I've gone to different shows or followed them online. Just a lot of one-off matches, and sometimes they'll get a storyline right, and it'll be subtle, and they'll do something that makes sense as you see it moving forward month to month. For example, somebody I know who you've wrestled with in VCW, but up in another company, when they did Miles Hawkins turning from being a member of the trade in MCW to being a babyface, they totally did subtle digs with him having a falling out over several months, and it slowly happened and got to the point that you knew it was going to happen soon, but you didn't know when. So I just think that's a good thing to do. But then I've also seen things at other companies where the babyface comes in, it's a fan favorite, picking up the kids in the audience, giving them his bandana or whatever. Then at the end of the match, I mean, the end of the event, the same very night, they do a heel turn out of nowhere on the person with no build up for it.
Yeah, well, I think just on independent shows, I think it can be hard. There's sometimes they don't know what the follow up date is or like who's going to be available when. I think things get rushed, and a lot of times stories, if they're willing to do a story, it becomes like beholden to circumstance actually executing it, which I think usually hurts the execution of it.
And I've also seen where the angles were carried on social media, and not every fan who comes to the show has seen the social media videos.
Totally, yeah. I would totally agree with that. I don't know outside of a real television company where the wrestlers or the performers have millions of followers if it's really worthwhile to be talking trash to each other on Twitter or Facebook or wherever. But I don't know, whatever. Not my thing.
Tell me about your history in the wrestling business working with Wheeler Yuta.
Okay, me and Yuta, I don't know. I think if you check his Wikipedia, I've known Yuta. I believe I met him through Chikara, which he was training at, but I believe he was trained originally elsewhere, and he was wrestling under a different character then. But then we have wrestled as Logan Easton Laroux and Wheeler Yuta twice at Nova. The first time I beat him, the second time he beat me. And we are the only two Commonwealth Cup champions, which was Nova Pro's tournament that only lasted twice. But nonetheless, I won the first one. He won the second one, and we were never able to have that blow off match. So that was what November 11th is all about. Other than my retirement, is I'd like to get to be 2-1 over Wheeler Yuta in this area.
Following up on that, what's it going to be like for you going back home to Alexandria area, Northern Virginia, to wrestle again after wrestling mainly VCW down in the Tidewater area?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be almost 5 years since Nova Pro closed its doors, so it'll definitely be a homecoming of sorts. I'm curious how the fans react to me. They definitely booed me back then. We'll see what happens now. But I'm really excited for it. I'm excited to see a lot of people and a lot of fans that I haven't seen for a long time there, and I think it should be a great show on the 11th.
And I'm hoping to be there because I've never been to a VCW.
I appreciate it, man. I hope to see you there. On top of my match, there's a lot of great action lined up. Nyla Rose, my friend the Boar, the VCW champions, defending against Joseph Keys, which I'm sure is going to be a killer match as well.
What's your most embarrassing moment in wrestling?
I mean, I've had plenty of matches that I've been wrestling a long time. So with that, I think it comes with the territory. Plenty of matches that like something has gone wrong, be it a botch or just crowd is not feeling whatever is happening. And sometimes you can try to work them, and if the crowd never comes up, it's just like, man, I feel fucking stupid right now. That time that I dove into those chairs, I don't know if it was as painful as it was. It was definitely embarrassing as well. I'd say those are probably the worst times. It's been times I've had to really go to the bathroom like right as soon as my music hits, and that's like personally embarrassing. Luckily, the fans are probably not aware of it, but it sucks to be backstage and have that feeling. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
What do you consider some of your top matches? Talk about maybe 3 or 4 matches that are your top matches in your career.
It'll be hard. It'll change every day. The first one, just because it's fresh on my mind, that NRG versus Devastation Corporation in Norfolk, Virginia. It was on a Shakar event called the Marta Complex. Just a killer match. We really beat the shit out of each other, and I was happy to do it. Me and Sanjay Dutt at a Nova Pro event. I think it was last exit to Springfield. We had like street fight type match or relaxed rules kind of match. Me and Eric Royal at one of the Nova projects wrestled for like 30 minutes, and by the end of it, they're truly, I don't toot my own horn too often, but there was not a fan in a seat by the end of it. Everybody was up, just fired up, ready to watch it. And let me cap it off with a fourth one. This isn't me as Logan Easton Laroux, but me as Blank against Still Life with Apricots and Pears, now Edith Surreal at King of Trios 2019. We had a singles match that capped off a long story we were doing in Chikara that I was really proud of. So I'll go with those four today.
Okay, after 16 years in the business, what made you decide to retire now?
16 years in the business made me retire after 16 years in the business. I'm getting older. I'm 33 now. Other things in my personal life, I think that maybe I've neglected or haven't given the time and care that I think I probably should have. I'd like to take care of. And fortunately, I have some bumps and bruises, but for the most part, my body's held up. And as I'm getting older, I don't know if I'm happy to leave now healthy on my own terms as opposed to being forced to leave or even worse, becoming embarrassing. Or I would never want to be the guy in the show that like people are wrestling. They're like, oh, you can kind of get something out of them, but you got to do all the bumping basically. Or like, I don't want to be the guy that people don't want to wrestle. I'd like to leave with everyone, hopefully having had a good experience working with me either in the ring or professionally as a performer and a wrestler.
How do you want to be remembered by fans?
Somebody that you enjoy watching, I hope. I hope that I helped. If I'm a heel, which I would say I've been, probably 90% of the matches I've had, I've been a heel. I hope that the babyface left better than when they came in. I hope fans had fun booing me and even maybe had that genuine hateful reaction, but it's something they can like later look back on and be like, man, he was a fucker. I hope to be remembered as somebody people enjoyed watching. I'm not dead or anything yet, so like who knows? I could get bored 6 months into next year and suddenly have a comeback run. But I just hope that anyone who ever saw me wrestle felt like they got their money's worth out of it. And for the wrestlers, I hope I'm remembered as somebody everyone had fun wrestling, and hopefully either I helped them get a little bit more over, or maybe I helped them try something they hadn't tried before, something like that. I hope I've left a good impression on both the fans and the wrestlers.
Some people say this is a specific match. Some people say this is a specific championship. I had one person say this was seeing their parents see them wrestle every night that they were on the show.
Okay.
What's your proudest accomplishment in wrestling?
This might seem kind of lame because it's maybe it's too obvious an answer, and in the scheme of things, maybe isn't super important. But the first AEW Dark match I had was against Tony Nese, also down in Norfolk. and I was wrestling as a good guy, which again I'm not super comfortable with. But they gave us for a dark match, they gave us a bit of time, and Tony was kind enough to give me like a pretty good amount of offense for just an enhancement local guy. And the whole arena, I think we were the first match of the taping period. The whole arena was chanting Logan during portions of it. So for me, that is personal accomplishment, and is some vindication that like, hey, maybe these at the time only 14 years, still too long, hasn't been all for nothing.
And you've been in the business for 16 years. You've seen independent wrestling change a lot during that time, and most recently, COVID really caused a lot of challenges for the independent scene and even for the national scene. So, what do you see as being the state of independent wrestling and the state of wrestling overall right now, moving forward, and where you think things are going to go in the future?
A loaded question. The state of independent wrestling now, I think it's in a much better place than when I started. When I started, I think there was basically every independent was, to be honest, kind of the shits. At least in comparison to now, like there's a lot more people, older guys who didn't want to do anything. They were in it for whatever fucking reason. It's like a $50 payday, and it's like, but I'm not bumping. I'm calling in the ring. All that bullshit. That like, no, you're just lazy. And it was. I feel like people did a lot less traveling that I saw back then. So there wasn't as much intermixing, and there wasn't. There was MySpace, but there wasn't the social media networking possibilities you see now. That being said, unfortunately now I do feel like a lot of wrestling, especially in the independents, kind of follows the same template, and a lot of guys are kind of everyone can do too much. Everyone's good at everything, so I think it kind of like takes away some of the flavor of independent wrestling and like the idea of like a styles clash, which I think is the kind of the more exciting style of wrestling is like what happens when this grappler wrestles this high flyer. Now every match, everybody's good at hitting, everybody's good at wrestling, everybody's good at flying, and it takes 8 moves for me to beat you. Where we both get 8 moves, and then finally on the ninth one, you crumble. And I think independent wrestling fans, they're conditioned to know when to do that. This is awesome and pop and all that, but I feel like it's that whole, for lack of a better term, I think it's kind of like the PWG style. I think it's gotten a little stale. And I think on TV wrestling, unfortunately, similarly, as much as the fans are conditioned to that kind of reaction, has also, to me, just the actual in ring stuff does feel a little more stale. And I don't have a good answer for where to go because there is so much wrestling on TV. So, but unfortunately, it all feels a little, to me, it feels a little samey, which is easy for me to say on the outside looking in. That being said, I think wrestling is in a good place. I think there's better athletes now, people who are hungrier, more passionate than ever before in wrestling. There's more wrestlers, period, than ever before, which is good and bad because some of them maybe could have been buying tickets, and there's less people in the stands than there maybe could be. But who knows? WWE is super hot. I know they were just here locally in Northern Virginia. They were just at the George Mason Arena, and they totally sold out the house show. Which, to my knowledge, I don't know that that's happened since like the Attitude Era. So obviously, they're definitely doing something right. And having two companies on TV multiple times a week—that's good for wrestlers. Period. Any way you look at it, like you can get into stupid Twitter arguments or whatever. But no matter what, those are two viable companies in the United States that are helping a lot of wrestlers make a comfortable living, which is great. For my forecast for the rest of wrestling, I don't know. I think the art's there, and I think no matter what, wrestling is like comic books or like movies or any kind of entertainment medium. It's always going to be there, and it'll ebb and flow. But hopefully, wrestling is on a good track.
And I'll throw out a couple of points that I have in response to what you were talking about. I remember back when I started being a listener of podcasts, back early 2010s when I was commuting from Baltimore to DC on the train every day. Listened to all kinds of different podcasts. The only wrestling one I ever found that was regularly done and that was worth a damn was Colt Cabana at that point.
Yeah.
There's so many wrestling podcasts now, and I've added to the glut of them in the last year, so I'm kind of guilty of that. But it's just there's so many different choices and different types of podcasts, and along with the social media, it's just changed things a lot. And as far as TV goes, I mean, there was a new TV deal announced today. I don't know if you heard about the NWA deal.
Yeah, I did see that. To be honest, that's great though. That wrestling on network TV. When I was a kid, man, my mom sometimes didn't have cable, so all I had was SmackDown. Now, if somebody without cable, there's a lot of people without cable, but if they're watching network TV, you can get SmackDown and NWA, which are going to be two different flavors of wrestling too. So I think that's great.
One last question. If you were to give a farewell message right now to the fans, your fellow workers, and anyone else in the business, what would it be?
I would just say thank you. Like I said, I started when I was 16. I've loved wrestling since I was 5, and I've been able to do a lot of cool shit. And I would not have been able to do any of that if it wasn't for promoters taking a chance on me, my trainers doing the best they could with me, wrestlers helping me out, and of course, fans being there to support me. It doesn't take much to retweet something or to like something or even to post something complimentary on Twitter or social media. But I don't think people realize the power it has and how much it really means. It truly means a lot to me when I did see, like, when I posted the official match graphic with Yuta, how many people had nice things to say. And it meant a lot to me. So I really appreciate it. So my parting message is thank you for everything.
I want to thank you for being on, and hopefully we'll be seeing you on November 11th in Alexandria. I hope everybody in Northern Virginia and DC, Maryland area can get to that show as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
And now for our credits. I'm Jeff Quinton, and I'm the host. Our producer is Scott English. If you'd like to contribute to the freight cost of this podcast and receive a mention as a producer in these credits, please contact us at dmvprowrestling@gmail.com. Our production assistant is Josie Quinton. Musical credits are provided in the notes for this episode. Thanks again for joining us, and be sure to visit dmvprowrestling.com every day for the latest pro wrestling news.
Tickets to the gun show! Yeah! 2 tickets to the gun show!